First Industrial Revolution. And now just because it says the First Industrial Revolution, this is a way historians classify the different periods of the revolution. It's still ongoing. Today it's you had the information revolution, the technology revolution. So it's still ongoing today. So the Erie Canal. This is an interesting quick little history of it here, the video. Construction starts in 1817, finished in 1825. It's 363 miles long, and it connects the Hudson River to Albany to Lake Erie at Buffalo. Guys, all this does is basically it opens up trade from the old Northwest Territories to New York and overseas. By the way, this was, at its time, this was the longest canal in the world. The National Road was funded by Congress. East-West Highway, it was, as you see, construction started in 1806, run to 1811. It turned out to be the only federally funded transportation project of its time as far as roads are concerned. Here's what it roughly looked like. States, localities, and private businesses took the initiative for the internal improvements. 4,000 miles of toll roads have been built en route to the eastern cities where profits would be high. Major roads were also built connecting to the west. So you're going to see a lot of road development, but it's going to be mainly private. Steamboats. In 1807, this young man up here in the right-hand corner, top right-hand corner, Robert Fulton, he invented the steamboat. Transporting by the river was faster and cheaper, but boats could only travel downstream because of their heavy cargo. The steamboat was able to travel upstream, and as you see, it's invented by Robert Fulton in 1807. The name of the first steamboat was the Clermont, which went about 150 miles up the Hudson River in just 32 hours. The invention of the steamboat spurred construction of other canals in the U.S. And there's the history of the steamboat. That's what it looked like. The Iron Horse, Tom Thumb. Peter Cooper, he's a wealthy, self-educated industrialist. He took the engine based off of the ones originally developed in Britain by George Stephenson in the 1820s. In 1830, he came up with Tom Thumb. It pulled its first load of passengers on the B&O Railroad line, the Baltimore to Ohio. Top speed was 10 miles an hour. 13 miles of track were laid. Railroads had arrived, cheaper than the wagon or water transportation, and just to give you an idea, by 1850, over 6,100 miles of track had been laid. And this is Tom Thumb right here. Manufacturing shifted from hand tools to complex machines. Skilled artisans gave way to organized workers, sometimes unskilled. Factories replaced home-based shops. So you just need to remember manufacturing goes from homes to factories, and it goes from handmade products to machine-made products. Industrialization is basically industry develops quickly for several reasons, and you need to know these reasons. There's three of them here. The American system of free enterprise, competition, the cheapest and fastest way to make a product, and low taxes meant more money to invest. Typically, the U.S. had very low taxes here. So in the Northeast, you have factories sprouted up along riverside, streams, and water power. Investors were in the Northeast, the majority of them were, and immigration provided great labor force. Samuel Slater, he's the father of American industry, the gentleman over there on the top right-hand corner. Britain had strict laws prohibiting anyone from sharing their inventions with foreigners. However, in 1789, Samuel Slater came to America and constructed the British water frame from memory. The frame stretched and spun raw cotton fiber into thread. He actually came over here disguised as a farmer. So Francis Lowell, and once again, check some of these videos out at the bottom. They're pretty good. They're short too. Francis Lowell, he opened mills in Massachusetts where he introduced mass production of cotton cloth after touring Britain. He built residences for his workers in Lowell, Massachusetts, mainly women and children that worked in the factory for less wages. Guys, he's the first one to build residences on the site of the factory. So when you look here and you see these are like barracks. These are where the women lived. They wouldn't have to walk so far to work. So in the South, cotton becomes king. Demand in Britain in the North transforms Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama into booming cotton kingdoms. Now, cotton's actually on its way out. Slavery actually is on its way out in the 1780s, 1790s because it took so long to get the finished product of cotton. You had to pick all the seeds out, and before the cotton gin, you had to do it by hand. But in 1793, with Eli Whitney's cotton gin, it made it very, very efficient to get the seeds out of cotton, and it actually does extend slavery. Economically speaking, though, slavery in the 1780s, it looked like it was on its way out. Now, Eli Whitney did not invent this thing to extend slavery. He just saw the need to make something more efficient. And so, anyway, as you see here, the cotton gin helped expand slavery and actually keep it around. Before the cotton gin, 6,000 bales of cotton a year. 1 year after the cotton gin, 100,000 bales a year. In the 1840s, 2 million bales. And look at 1860, 4 million bales domestically and 191 million bales to European markets. So here's some pictures, actual pictures of slaves working in the field, and here's what the slave barracks, here's what they look like. And here's actually a family. I think there's a mother in here, but here's a family playing in their free time. So interchangeable parts. Eli Whitney comes up with this cotton gin, but he come up with parts that would fit on other cotton gins called interchangeable parts. Think about your car. Think about anything with a lot of parts on it. We use interchangeable parts all the time now. Nuts, screws, bolts, things like that. That's forms of interchangeable parts. So it transforms gun making from as you see, from a one-by-one process into a factory process. And as I said, it made cotton, this whole invention and the idea of interchangeable parts makes cotton production 10 times faster. There's a good little video on this. Here's what the cotton gin looked like in the early days, and here's the actual picture of one. But you would put your cotton in here, and you had, as you see here, the seeds would come down to the bottom. You have a grate here that actually holds the cotton, and it spits the seeds out. Okay, so Samuel F.B. Morse, he perfected the telegraph in 1832. He does not invent it, but he does perfect it. He develops Morse code for sending messages, and actually he has key to his development here. He had an 18-year-old, I think it was a Russian immigrant, that come up with a lot of this code, if not all of it. And since he worked for Samuel F.B. Morse, then Morse took the credit for it. So the kid didn't sue Morse because he figured he's 18 years old at the time and he'd come up with another great invention. Spoiler alert, he did not. But anyway, in 1848, a group of newspapers pooled their resources to collect and share news, and it became the Associated Press, the same Associated Press that exists today. Some other inventions here. Charles Goodyear in 1839, he invented vulcanized rubber. This over here is what he invented, this where it's pliable rubber. He doesn't invent the tire. The tire company comes out in the 1890s after Elias died in the 1860s, and different people. He died actually pretty much a broke man. Elias Howe patented the sewing machine in 1846. Some Midwest farming inventions. 1819, Jethro Wood, he invented the cast iron plow, another concept here with interchangeable parts. 1834, Cyrus McCormick invented the mechanical reaper harvester, so you can harvest wheat. And of course, John Deere in 1837, he developed the steel plow. There it is right there. He didn't invent the tractor. He just invented the plow. Urbanization. People who moved from farms to villages to cities, people who moved from farms and villages to cities in search of factory jobs. Cities doubled their population. Immigration begins to increase. Class differences, capitalist versus labor, the shift from natural to artificial power, and from regional to national distribution. So here's what the working conditions were like. No rights for workers, no workers' comp, no minimum wage, no vacation days, no health insurance. Lateness was not tolerated. You were usually terminated or fired. The typical wage for skilled labor was about $3 a day. Unskilled was $1.25. Women and children were paid about 1/3 of any of those wages. So even if the woman had a skill, she made 1/3 of it. Workday typically was 14 hours a day. You worked 6 to 7 days a week. And if you were in the steel industry, you worked 7 days a week. Dangerous conditions here. Lighting was not good at all in the factories. Few windows, ventilation problems, no safety devices, no first aid kits, no first aid care. Dusty, dirty conditions in the factories, and few workers operating many machines, which led to a lot of injuries and deaths. Labor unions were hoping to improve their working conditions for the workers, or hoping to improve working conditions for workers if they would join together. Skilled craftsmen, as you see, they would form unions. People fought for public schools. They focused on single trade labor unions. They used or they asked for the same changes, higher wages, and shorter working days. They didn't have much success. That's what you really need to know. In the early days, in the early 1800s, employers refused to recognize them or bargain with them. Courts often ruled against these unions. The country wanted industry first and really didn't care much about the worker. As you see, they did get some gains in 1840 with President Van Buren reducing the workday to 10 hours a day. And in 1842, union strikes became legal. So this is an activity. If you are watching this, you know the answers to your activity now. The market revolution. We need to know the U.S. market expanded. Specialization, as you see, to raise 1 to 2 crops and being self-sufficient. Market revolution, people bought and sold goods rather than making them. So we're going to see people start buying goods rather than making everything themselves. This changed the U.S. economy completely. More people would buy goods and services, and it's easier for them to consume. It's easier for the consumer. An entrepreneur, basically, is a French word for undertake. An entrepreneur invested their own money into new industries, so they take all the risks of opening a new business, and then sometimes they get the rewards. The impact on the household, as you see, the farmers became important to the industrial economy. They produce food for the cities. Do not forget that. If it wasn't for farmers producing food for the cities, even to this day, you'd be out there farming. They couldn't grow food in the cities. Even though you see some skyscrapers with grass on the top of their buildings, that's not enough to sustain a city. Farmers needed machines to help them with the increased demand, and this helped industrialists and production. And you're going to see a lot of revolutions in agriculture because of this increased demand. So here's some impacts of the first industrial revolution: the rise of the city, rise of the middle class, helped facilitate new banking practices, rise of factories, wage income, the rise of labor unions, and led to the commercial revolution of the 1840s. However, most people in America in the early 1800s still farmed.